You're live with the guy. I'm Guy, and we're live. I'm bringing you all the news and politics of the day, and I'm bringing it to you cold first thing in the morning before I've really had a chance to research it, so you get my true and authentic opinions. Later tonight, we have a secondary show right on this channel at 9:15 Mexico City time. It's called Live with Nat and the Guy. And Nat's sitting here switching for me right now. She's off camera. On the night show, she'll be on camera.
Hello. It's more like the evening show. It's 12.
Yeah. Nat also has a secondary show in Spanish. So if you're a Spanish speaker, that comes on at 8 o'clock Mexico City time on our other channel called Nat and the Guy Espanol. Okay, we got a lot of stories today. A lot of Canadian heavy stories. Yesterday it was US centric, it seemed. Maybe tomorrow or on Monday it will be Mexico. But we have Hollywood failing up. The new X-Men director is expected to be. We won't talk about it yet. Let's read the other headlines. We have the Poo Patrol in Vancouver. I found this very interesting because if you know the origins of this channel, we started it in Vancouver with the trucker convoy, or otherwise known as the Freedom Convoy at the time. That's kind of the inspiration of why we started all this. And then we have Trudeau's refugees getting paid $81,000 a year. Then the Bank of Canada says Canada is headed for some really hard times. This is the second thing that's come out now, predicting Canada's got some tough times ahead of them. Then we got a lot more news after that, but let's start with the X-Men story. I see you've brought it up there.
Yes.
So we got X-Men's new movie, Eyes, Thunderbolts director Jake Schreier. Schreier. Well, he's not very memorable because the Thunderbolts wasn't very good. And the fact that he's going from Thunderbolts to now X-Men, Marvel's is failing in general. So the fact that the one kind of franchise that may be able to save them is X-Men, and they're giving it to a failed director already, I don't think this is good news for the X-Men series. The one good thing that could prolong the life of Marvel's, I'm not saying it's going to save it, is Hugh Jackman. I believe he signed a long-term contract to continue to do these movies, and he was very much against it. So I'm guessing they gave him a shit ton of cash.
A lot of cash.
Do you know anything about this?
Well, I mean, X-Men has always had some very liberal progressive tendencies.
Yeah.
Because it's about mutants that have to fight against the prejudice of the world. But the latest ones I haven't liked, the new generation ones.
Well, I always thought it was based upon, or it could be based upon liberal values, and it was a good way to really present a conservative film or a film for the moderates and really sneak in a lot of messaging propaganda without people really noticing. It's one of those movies you can do that with. So, and I don't mind it if it's done tastefully. Mm-hmm. But I was talking about Hugh Jackman there. Did you hear anything about him signing a longer term contract? I was reading something about that where he signed a multiple film contract, but I haven't confirmed it. No. But this story's coming up, so maybe I'll try to confirm it for tonight's episode with Nat and the Guy. Mm-hmm. Okay, maybe we'll move on from there to the Poo Patrol in Vancouver. Did you manage to get an article for this one?
Not an article, just this bit.
Okay, why don't you read that out and then we'll talk about it a little bit.
Okay. Oh, no, not that one.
Yeah. Oh, that wasn't the one.
Because you always move the stories around.
Yeah, I like to have one story to lead into the next story. So there's a bunch of Canadian stories all leading up to the collapse of Canada.
Yes, because you're Canadian and we lived there for 13 years.
Yeah, we now live in Mexico City.
So in 2021, the city of Vancouver reallocated money set for transitional employment to a stuff that comes out of humans pilot program in which people picked up 13,000 pieces of poop from the downtown area. This program is being brought back in 2025 due to demand. Oh,
why don't you read was that the highlighted bit?
So 13,000 cumulative poop removals in the downtown area, transitional employment. Pilot planned for 2021 was deferred due to the bad times and resourcing issues, and the funding was reallocated to the poop pilot program to extend the pilot program to the end of December 2021.
Okay, we have a poop problem here in Mexico City as well, but it's not human feces. It's dog poop here.
Yes.
A lot of dog poop. People don't pick up their dog poop as much. Not saying they all don't pick up their dog poop, but when I'm walking my dog, there's a lot of it lying around.
Yeah.
Now, in Vancouver, people actually are religiously pick up their dog poop. Problem is there is a ton of homeless people that are pooping all over the street, right in the middle of the sidewalk, broad daylight, noon, kids walking by, and they're just taking a dump. It is absolutely crazy. On top of that, what I was going to say is this original pilot program wasn't for human feces. It was originally for dog poop and other animal feces on the ground. What ended up happening, there was a huge demand for human feces, so they started picking that up. The program got canceled during COVID, and now there's a huge demand from businesses and things like this for the city to step in and start picking up human crap off the sidewalks. Although I think this is a good short-term solution, they need to come up with a long-term solution, and they're unwilling to do it because they're politically weak, I would say. What do I mean by that? The long-term solution is to start arresting people that have decent exposure in public and start arresting people that are also pooping in broad daylight in the middle of the street. It's one thing if it's in an alley behind a dumpster and it's an emergency. I still don't like the idea of that, but okay. But when it's in the middle of the sidewalk on a main street, it's crazy. It hurts tourism. It hurts the family element within the city.
But there's also, I mean, there's barely any families in Vancouver anymore, but there's also the whole thing where there are public restrooms quite spread out quite liberally throughout the city. But let's see how long it takes for YouTube to censor us because you've said the words like too many times.
Well, I think this word's kind of like on the border. It's a four-letter, or it is
but
a
you
four-letter
said the
word.
bad times word as well.
Okay, well, we'll see what happens.
Hopefully we'll stay on here.
YouTube's been pretty liberal lately with us, so maybe pushing the boundaries isn't the worst thing. Something else I was going to say, yeah, that was a great point. Vancouver, of all the cities I've been to, and I've been to a lot of major cities in North America and in Mexico now, Vancouver has the most public restrooms available. You don't have to pay for them or anything like that. They did have a big problem with homeless people taking these bathrooms over to live in. They've now kind of upgraded those so they're fully mechanicalized, so they'll shut, lock, and then water will spray the entire inside of this thing every time somebody's done using the bathroom, so it's hard to live in them now, and it keeps it extremely clean.
Yeah,
but
they sanitize. That's a sanitization thing.
So, I mean, the only way to really clean up this mess is to start arresting people and to start setting the precedent.
And to start realizing that Vancouver has a mental illness issue and an addictions issue.
Yeah.
Because this is where it stems from. It's not regular people doing it. It's people that have other issues that the city doesn't want to look into.
Yeah, I completely agree. And this is where all this is stemming from. It's stemming from drugs. And
illegal substances.
They've completely legalized illegal substances in every way, shape, or form. And then they brought that motto to many places in the States, like Oregon and Washington and things like that. It's a liberal's utopia as far as drug laws go. The problem the problem with that is they've liberalized it to such an extreme. They're literally giving money out to addicts. They're supplying them with substances, things like this. They're giving them safe housing to do it in. And this exacerbates people that already have a little bit of mental illness. When they become full-on addicts, that mental illness becomes widespread. Now, I will say this about Vancouver. They are providing money and resources to these people, which does cut down on violence as it's related to getting money for these illegal substances. There's not so much crime in the city with that, but there is a lot of just crazy crime, meaning people are kind of losing their minds. They have mental illness and they'll just randomly hit people. They'll have a sword on the street. There'll be a baseball bat. They'll be taking a crap in the middle of the sidewalk, things like that. So it's a different kind of crime that's occurring because it's the crime of mental illness, not the crime where people are trying to steal things to sell them to get illicit substances. So it's a very strange situation in Vancouver.
Do you want me to read a bit from CTV News?
Oh, yeah.
Because, I mean, just to prove that it is happening.
So CTV News is very liberal. Let's see what their take is on it, though.
Frustrations rise over human waste on Vancouver streets, prompting return of poop ferry program. This is from 2 days ago. It is a true city dweller's skill to be capable of walking while simultaneously engaging in conversation, scanning the pavement ahead, and being prepared with the stealth of an assassin to sidestep, dive, or change course at a mere moment's notice. Abandoned dog stuff on urban streets is an issue common in cities across the world, but in Vancouver, the obstacle course that awaits unsuspecting pedestrians is unique, and there's an extra layer of difficulty not typically found elsewhere. As public pooping in the city reaches new heights, residents, business owners, and business improvement areas leaders are calling for action that goes beyond the routine cleanups. The unfortunate thing is we've been talking about the poop problem here for a while now, says Wally Wargolet, Executive Director of Gastown Business Improvement Society, and we lived in Gastown for a while, and yes, that is one of the places where it concentrates the most. Wargolet said he was forced to implement his own initiative, affectionately dubbed the Poop Ferry Program, after other waste collecting programs proved ineffective. Run by social enterprise Clean Start BC, the project was initiated last year before lack of funding brought it to a halt months ago.
Okay, let's go back up to the picture they had for this article. So this is an extremely clean alley in Vancouver. I used to like taking pictures of alleys because I did photography and stuff, and I found them fascinating, especially the ones in Vancouver, because there was a lot of graffiti and just unsavory people. Usually you'll see about 100 people in an alley like this. On both sides of the alley, you'll have illicit substances dealers, like large groups of them. You'll have 10 on each side of the alley, which was crazy. I used to work in Gastown as a bouncer at a place called Whiskey Dicks, which was kind of funny, but they did pay a lot of money and it was well paying. But it was right next to one of the most dangerous alleys within Vancouver, and it was filled with probably 100 drug addicts, 10 illicit substances dealers on each side of the alley. The public sector government funded van would pull up like 3 times a night while I was on shift, and they would distribute needles, and the crackheads would just swarm this van, and they would just be throwing them out the windows because they didn't want to have extremely close contact with these people. So I always like to keep an eye on what's going on with Vancouver because it is the progressive model. So you can see where they want to take other cities within North America and the world if they do get their way.
Yes.
Okay, let's maybe go on to another story. And this was Trudeau's refugees are getting free $81,000 a year from the Liberal government. And I know Trudeau's no longer in office, but a lot of this documentation is now coming out. And Mark Carney is the new Premier of Canada.
And just quickly, Rafa says, hello. So hello, Rafa. He says, I watched a very interesting video about the new Pope from Agustin Laje, but it is in Spanish. So I'll watch it and maybe talk about it tonight in the Spanish section.
Oh, he gave you a link for it?
Well, I know Agustin Laje.
Oh, you do?
I know his channel, yes.
Oh, okay.
He's the one that spoke at CPAC.
Yeah,
one of the ones that spoke at CPAC.
It's going to be very interesting if he actually takes a hard stance against the Pope. I really hope he does.
From Argentina. Agustin Laje is from Argentina. He was like the right-hand man of Milei.
Yeah.
Milei's right-hand man.
Yeah, but Milei right now is in...
Floundering?
I wouldn't say he's floundering. There's a lot of good things happening with Argentina, and he's really the tip of the spear on trying new things as far as libertarianism goes, conservatism goes, things like this. A lot of it's working, a lot of it's not, but because all of it's not working, he's being forced to deal with globalists and global banks and things like this to get major funding. We've talked about the billions he's been approved for through... I forgot the name of the global bank, but the global banking cartel. So it's going to be interesting if he actually takes a firm stance against the new Pope. I would think he would, but that's just my guess. So I'm interested to see what you say tonight after you watch that. Mm-hmm. Okay. Again, refugees within Canada are getting $81,000 a year from the Liberal government. Mark Carney's staff within his administration is the exact same that Trudeau's was, and he has all the exact same policies because Parliament has been frozen in Canada. So my guess would be this is still going on in Canada. Why don't you read a little bit of this and then we'll get into it?
Yes, I'll avoid the swear words. But did you know Trudeau's refugees are getting a free $81,760 a year from the Liberal government? effing grand. That's 20,000 more than the average Canadian salary, and it's tax-free. Explain to me how the hell.
Okay, wait, let's stop right there for a second. This is $81,000 tax-free. So if you make $81,000 in Canada, you're probably getting about $40,000 in taxes taken off and you have to pay. So you would actually only have $40,000. So the fact that these refugees have to pay no taxes on that $81,000, that's the equivalent of making $160,000 in Canada. That's a lot of money.
Yes.
Okay, continue.
It's more than I think I ever made.
That's way more than I've ever
Canada.
made. I had 4 jobs at the end because it was hard to get hired because DEI policies. So I went from jobs where I was making $25, $30 an hour to where I was making a minimum wage and I had to work 4 jobs and I was being threatened to be let go because I refused to get the jibby jab.
Mm-hmm. So how the hell is this fair to all of us who have worked and are working and continue to work real jobs and pay taxes, not sitting on our butts or out protesting and being a nuisance? So people claiming to be refugees in Canada get $224 per day from our government to eat and stay in a hotel room. That works out about $80,760 per year, 20,000 more. Absolutely unbelievable. And here we see there was an inquiry of ministry for the Canadian government. So it's like a Freedom of Information Act. And they did release that information from IRCC, which is Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada.
Yeah, and it's one thing when liberal governments, when they first want to flood a country with refugees, they try to say, oh, this is going to be a major benefit for the country. It's going to bring up the GDP, this and that. And at $81,000, it doesn't do any of that. It puts the government in major debt and forces the printing of money, which the Canadian government has done a lot of. We have a story of the Bank of Canada coming up, and they're talking about the economic collapse of Canada could soon be coming. That being said, why are they flooding the country with immigrants if it's costing them so much money? They need to change the voter demographic of Canada so the Liberal Party can stay in power. Also, this is this globalist agenda of a borderless country. We've seen recently that the new Pope is all for a borderless world, and he's very pro-immigration. He's gone directly against Trump and J.D. Vance on his X, saying he is very pro-immigration, specifically for Venezuelan immigrants and things like this. What nonprofit was it that said that Canada should take all the immigrants? We reported the other day.
Amnesty International.
Yeah, Amnesty International the other day suggested Canada should take all the illegals from the United States that they're currently deporting. And it wouldn't surprise me if that actually comes to fruition now, because they want to increase the population of Canada by the year 2035 or 2050 to 100 million people. And that may not seem like a lot, but Canada currently only has 40 million people. So that would be more than doubling the amount. That would be like 120 or 150% increase.
Mm-hmm. So this person asked to get this Freedom of Information Act inquiry. Said, with regard to the government's provision of goods and services to irregular border crossers seeking asylum, A, what items are provided to entrance at the time of crossing, B, what items are provided to entrance once they are relocated to accommodations, and C, what is the cost per item of provisions to entrance broken down by each item with its associated per unit cost. So for A, they said Public Safety Canada will respond to the part of the question. B, claimants in IRCC operated hotels, regardless of how they entered Canada, are provided with accommodations and meals once they are relocated. Service providers are contracted by the department to oversee operations at all IRCC temporary accommodation sites. They also help provide other essential items such as toiletries, medicines, diapers, etc. on an as-needed basis. C, average cost per room, cost at all sites, $140 per night per room based on January 2024 rates. Average cost per day for meals, $84 per day per claimant based on the 2024 January.
And because we started this channel during the period of the jibby jab and we were in Canada, I followed every news article very closely. They were locking people in hotels, which they called quarantine hotels, things like this. They also converted other hotels and forced it to take homeless people and immigrants. And they built that infrastructure very in depth in Canada. It wasn't a temporary infrastructure. They built permanent facilities as well as converted old hotels and things like that, and newer four-star hotels to take immigrants. And they've continued that practice. So it almost seemed like what happened during COVID was the building of this permanent infrastructure within Canada. And that's how this all came to be. And people didn't notice because they implemented it all during COVID and then just kept it around and transitioned it for immigrants. Now, I talk a lot about the Alberta separation movement, and I hope it does happen. But that being said, if Alberta does separate and Canada loses 4.4 million people, their GDP is going to plummet, and I would expect Mark Carney to take a lot of the American immigrants. This would permanently change the United States into a progressive liberal country because of the voting bloc. The Conservatives would never be able to win again in Canada. And in America, it would permanently change it to a conservative country where the Liberals would never be able to win, because you would not only have 4.4 million people coming from Alberta, but a lot of other Canadians that want to be part of the U.S. would migrate to Alberta before the separation movement to become U.S. citizens. And this is mainly conservatives and independents and libertarians within Canada. Okay, why don't we go to the convenience store worker now? We'll just play this video right off the top and then we'll get our thoughts and opinions of it.
Sure.
And what 1 second, actually. I remember when I got this. This is right by where we used to live in Gastown. This used to be Tent City. They cleaned it up a little bit here, it looks like. But there's a lot of homeless people in this area. This gentleman's not the most well-spoken, but he does seem to be a convenience store owner. So you do get a good idea of how this is affecting small businesses. And if the government's integrating into small businesses on this level, as this gentleman does claim, I can only imagine how integrated they are into this corporate movement and placing migrant workers into corporations on a permanent basis. Okay, let's play it.
They're struggling. The 20-year-olds, there's no jobs for them out there.
Who gets all the jobs?
Okay. The migrants. The companies get to hire the migrants.
Oh, no.
They pay them less. Okay, and also they could get kickbacks from the government. I own a convenience store, for instance. I hire you, you're from India. Then I get an MLRI, I get to hire you, and basically what happens is I pay you $20 an hour. The government every 3 months gives me a 30% kickback. I was in Prince George, my hometown. The people at the movie theater, the lady was telling me she doesn't want to work here anymore because everyone she works with is Indian and they all speak Punjab. So she goes to work. She's a Canadian kid that grew up in a small conservative town that can't work in a place because no one that she works with actually speaks English, because they come here and they don't speak English either. If you were that person that owned the movie theater and your cost of doing business were 30% went straight into just hiring the kids, hiring employees. Now, if that 30% now to pay 60% of that 30% because you got that all back, you're going to make more money. So what do people do?
Okay,
they take care of themselves.
Okay, so this was very interesting because small businesses, they're often a 30% kickback to a small convenience store owner on all wages if he hires an immigrant. I would only think that would increase the larger your business is. So a 40 or 50% kickback for a place like Tim Hortons. And when you go to Tim Hortons in Canada,
which is a coffee shop,
which is the largest Canadian coffee shop in Canada, and it's huge in the United States as well. And now it's here in Mexico City. It's actually a high-class donut shop here in Mexico City.
Yeah.
But in Vancouver, people go to it because it is the bottom of the barrel, cheapest place you can get coffee, other than making it yourself. But they have a permanent stream of foreign workers going through there. So I would think it would be closer to 40 to 50% because it's a permanent basis where the government can place immigrants and things like this. It also shows the second failure of the Canadian government, and this is happening in a lot of liberal nations around the world, but they're failing the immigrant because they're no longer requiring them to integrate into the Canadian population and the Canadian culture. They don't even require them to speak English anymore, which is crazy, but they're placing them in jobs where they're interacting with not only the public, but other workers. And when you have just one person or two people like that, it's one thing. But when the majority of the staff becomes immigrant workers and they decide to speak Hindi or another language, it's really off-putting to people that are in the local population that do have those jobs and to your general public that have to interact with them.
Well, it becomes difficult for anybody that is in that environment that doesn't speak that language. So it essentially pushes everybody out. And it's kind of like a DEI without being DEI fully.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't know how, like, they're not only giving them $80,000 a year, they're giving them a job, they're giving them housing, they're giving them food. Like, why wouldn't you go there if you're an immigrant? Yeah. It would make no sense not to. And if you're an immigrant and like, Canada is a very hard country to illegally or legally immigrate to because it is so isolated. You either have to pass through a major body of water on the east or west coast, or you have to come in through the United States, which is very much shut down right now. We got a story later where we're going to show these migrant facilities, how they used to be and how they are today. But let's go into what we got next, and that is the Bank of Canada. And this is a little bit of a longer, drier clip, but bear with me because it's really the raw data, and this is actually the Bank of Canada representative saying this. There was also another major representative that put out a paper that was saying within 20 years, if Canada stays on the same track it is now and doesn't change, people will be poaching animals for food in the forest, and there will be two classes of people, a small upper elite class and a major impoverished class that will basically have to hunt and fish in order to survive, which is crazy to even think about, and especially because that came from an official organization within Canada.
Mm-hmm. The Bank of Canada, which Mark Carney was heading at one point.
Yeah, Mark Carney's been controlling the economy of Canada for the past 10 years through Justin Trudeau, and now he's the front man for it. Why you're going to think anything's going to change? I don't know. But let's listen to the Bank of Canada.
12 months, particularly in households without a mortgage. For example, the share of these households that are behind on credit card or auto loan payments has continued to go up. Among households with a mortgage, about 60% are facing renewal this year or next. Most of those renewing will see their payments rise because they took out their mortgage during the pandemic when rates were at historic lows.
Pause it for a sec. Okay, so I have to explain one thing about Canada, and it's different than the United States and a lot of other countries. When they say you're going to own nothing and you're going to be happy, they already have the legislation passed within the banking system and with the political legislative system in order to take everything you own. The major thing people own that have future equity they can pass to their children is their homes. The problem with that is if you've taken out a loan from the Bank of Canada or another bank in Canada, every 5 years, I believe it is, the mortgage rate changes. So it's not a fixed mortgage rate for the life of the loan. So 1 year it could be at 0% and the next time it could be at 25%. And because Canada is headed for major economic upheaval, right now the interest rate's going to go way up. But if they completely collapse, the interest rate's going to go so high, people are going to have to abandon their homes. Let's continue.
The average increase in payment will be smaller than we expected a year ago. Still, if a large shock causes job losses, it'll be harder for some households to keep up with their debt payments. A prolonged trade war may be that shock. It would cause demand for Canadian exports to fall. It would disrupt supply chains, threatening jobs and incomes. Workers in trade-dependent industries could find it particularly difficult to continue managing their debt. A prolonged trade war would also matter for businesses. Most Canadian businesses have managed to adjust to past interest rate increases, and the surge in small business insolvencies last year proved to be temporary. But businesses in trade-related sectors, especially those with high debt, low profitability or cash reserves, could also fall behind on debt payments. But if credit losses occur on a large enough scale, banks could cut back on lending in response. Struggling households and businesses would then have less access to credit to get through tough times. This cycle could exacerbate the economic downturn. In the non-bank financial sector, the growing presence of hedge funds in the market for Government of Canada bonds raises some concerns. Government bond markets are the foundation of the financial system, and they need to function smoothly for all other markets to work well.
Pause it for a quick second. When Canada decided to print money, it decided to print bonds and then access that money directly through the government and the Bank of Canada. They wanted this to have a level of deniability. They were directly printing money. That's why the bond market is over leveraged within Canada. And Canada, even though she's calm and speaking about this thing calmly, they are on the razor's edge of an economic collapse. We'll talk a little bit about the tariff deal. I know Canada is extremely worried about that, but there are good points and bad points to what could potentially be coming. Let's finish this clip though.
The increased activity by hedge funds has helped absorb increased issuance of government debt, keeping yields lower and liquidity higher. But hedge funds have also taken on increasingly large amounts of leverage to fund their purchase of government bonds. And this makes them more likely to pull back from these crucial markets in periods of stress, introducing added volatility. The recent gyrations in the U.S. Treasury market clearly illustrated this risk. If the trade war causes a larger spike in volatility than we've seen so far, leveraged hedge funds might rush to sell their holdings. That could strain liquidity across core markets, increasing stress throughout the financial system.
And she tried to put this as easy as possible. What she's talking about is the entire corporate and elite collapse of Canada. The middle class has already been hollowed out. When you come to Mexico, everybody just opens a business on the street, and then once they can afford it, they'll open a little shop, so on and so forth. That doesn't exist in Canada anymore. It's almost complete corporately owned now. It's very rare you see an independent owned business within Canada. Also, that being said, where was I going to go with this?
Not being able to open businesses in Canada?
No, do you have anything to say about this?
No, I mean, it's not a surprise. It's been a ticking time bomb for a very long time.
Oh, I was going to go into the tariff deal with the United States. So there's a good side and a bad side to this. If they use the same template they did with the UK, which I would fully expect, and I would expect Canada to have to sign that tariff deal because they're in a situation where they don't have many other trade partners that can float their economy. It will maybe save their economy from total economic collapse and keep them afloat, but barely above board. It will help the United States to an extreme amount. But one thing it will do for the general public is prices in Canada will fall through the floor, which is a good thing, meaning food prices, lumber prices, other prices will no longer be extremely high in Canada. A single banana in Canada cost me $1. Here it cost me about 2 cents, I think, in Mexico City.
No, like 50 cents.
No, it's not. I checked it. It was 2 cents for me the other day.
How much is it?
It's 2 cents for a banana.
No, but in pesos, how much is it?
Oh, I don't know. It was like when I intentionally did that.
One banana must be what, like 25 pesos?
Something like that.
So that's $1.79.
No, it's not.
Then 10 pesos? That'd be 72 cents.
No, I think it was 7 pesos for 3 bananas.
Nah.
Yes.
That would be 5 cents.
So yeah, that's what I said.
Okay. I'll double check when we go to the grocery store again.
I checked when we first came because that was my big gripe about Canada, how much the food prices have gone up. But the tariff deal they just negotiated with the UK was really structured around the major corporate interest of the United States and benefited them. That was farming, chemical supply, tractor supply, big machinery, things like this, especially the farming sector and the meat sector. All tariffs were dropped in the UK, and all the food was, not just the food, but all imports coming from the US is given priority, meaning they're not stopped at customs, so they can go straight to food shelves before they rot or anything like that. Canada has built an industry of monopolies and cartels based around tariffs, so other countries can't get their goods in there, and then they jack up the prices to an extreme amount. Canada is one of the highest priced countries that I've ever seen. If competition is allowed to come in there and freely trade without a tariff, prices are going to drop through the floor, which would ultimately be a good thing. Now, if there was also a housing collapse, so housing prices were back at a reasonable level, this would give hope to the new generation. So it's not necessarily all bad if there is an economic collapse in Canada. It would be bad for the older generation, but the younger generation would actually maybe like it a little bit, because also if there's a job collapse in Canada, a lot of Canadian workers are high-skilled workers that can work online or do work online for companies out of other countries. So an economic collapse in Canada wouldn't hit the Canadian general public as hard as it would in other countries. Mm-hmm. Do you have anything?
No.
No? Okay.
Glad I left.
Yeah, we left just at the right time. And well, maybe that being said, based on the economic template for this tariff deal they had with the UK, it looks like they're going to replicate that with a lot of allies. Mature economies like Canada and the UK have very little to gain from that trade negotiation other than keeping their head above water, while the US has major upside. It's really making Donald Trump look like a tough-nosed negotiator, and I was very surprised the UK signed that contract. On the flip side of that, a country like Mexico, whose economy is not matured and doesn't have a lot of tariffs on the United States, actually has a much bigger upside than the US. And Donald Trump kind of alluded to this the other day when he was talking about what countries would benefit the most from these trade deals. He knows mature economies won't benefit as much as the US will. But as these emerging economies like Mexico continue to grow and continue to become major economies, although the upside for the US in the beginning will be small and it will be large for the US, that slowly shifts over time. So the US would have a big interest in the emergence of the Mexican economy. So let's go into the next story here. Trump float, or what was that, the next story? Okay, let's do the cash patel one after that. I didn't realize there was a Trump story there. Trump floats China tariff to 80% ahead of meetings. Why don't you read the headline and then read a little bit of the article? Let's get a feel for what he's saying.
Sure. So Trump floats cutting Chinese tariffs from 145% to 80% before weekend talks. Meeting aimed at de-escalating trade war after Chinese exports beat expectations despite slump in trade. Trump has floated cutting tariffs on China from 100 before the weekend meeting as he looks to de-escalate the trade war. Top U.S. officials are expected to meet a high-level Chinese delegation this weekend in Switzerland in the first significant talks between the two nations since Trump provoked a trade war with stiff tariffs on imports. The U.S. president wrote 80% tariff on China seems right, up to Scott B. on his social media account on Friday, referencing to Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary. Bessent and James Greer, the U.S. Trade Representative, will meet their counterparts in Geneva in the most senior known conversations between the countries in months. The Trump administration announced this week it comes amid growing U.S. market concern over the impact of the tariffs on the prices of supply and consumer goods. Okay, this is very interesting. So he has a 145% tariff on China right now. He had a moderately low tariff on the UK. The UK was the first in line, the first to sign the deal. He's stated that they got the best deal any country is going to get because they have a continuing tariff of only 10%, and it's going to go only up from there on other countries. If another country is able to cut a good deal, the 10% tariff will still remain on their country. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you have China, which he has 145% tariff on. Now he's going to negotiate that, which he's saying 80%. I would expect that to end up around between 60 and 80%. So now you have the low end of the spectrum, which is 10% with the UK if you're an ally, and you have the 60 to 80% with China. And this is going to kind of give guardrails to where these countries are going to be able to negotiate if they get a good deal or they get a bad deal. People are looking at the UK right now and they're thinking, well, that's not a good deal. We're not going to negotiate. We're going to negotiate better than the UK. But if he comes with the UK deal first and then the Chinese deal second with a 60 to 80% tariff,
it's going to make people flock to get the similar terms that the UK did. So this is a well thought out tariff strategy. And if you don't know about Trump's tariff strategy and you watch a lot of other news shows than ours, they're going to say Trump doesn't know what he's doing. He's just spitballing this. He hasn't thought this out. That's completely untrue. You've heard me say on this show multiple times, and I've shown the clips. This has been a 45-year project for Donald Trump. He's been talking about the tariffs since 1981 or 1982. I forgot the first interview I was able to find, but 1988 was the big interview that most people know. That was when he was on Oprah Winfrey, and he was a Democrat at that time. And he went very in depth with Oprah Winfrey about the tariffs and about specifically China with the tariffs. The other day when he was in the Oval Office giving a press conference, he said this is 40 years too late, but he is absolutely on track to do exactly what he wanted to do. So if anybody's going to try to implement these tariffs on behalf of the United States, you want somebody that's business oriented and has been thinking about it for 45 years. So everything, now that it's going from a thought process into action and actual contract negotiations with the UK and now China, it's looking better and better, and like this was a well thought out strategy. Okay, do you have anything about tariffs? It helps me out when you talk a little bit, and it helps the audience out because you're a much more likable personality.
No, no, but all the news you pick is geopolitics, and that's not my area of expertise.
Yeah, but if you say something,
if
you say something and it sounds dumb, it makes me sound smart.
Okay.
Let's go into Kash Patel here. And we're going to show the clip here. This is mainly just the clip I wanted to show. And this is why I really did like Kash Patel. He's well spoken, and he can come off the cuff really well. He not only does this in front of Congress, in front of the Senate, he can do it. He's been doing it in podcasts when he ran for this position. I just wish he would go after the deep state a lot more. That's kind of what he ran on. He has been going after child predators and things like this, which I really do like. But I also want to see him go after the deep state, and I'm trying to hold his feet to the fire on that one. Okay, let's play the video.
Gang cases, 3,000 cases against violent criminals.
That's not my question. We know that you...
Well, you asked if I was weaponizing the FBI, and I am not. I'm giving you the hard, concrete examples of the men and women putting handcuffs on bad people, doing harm to our children and innocent Americans. I do not see weaponization.
You have placed on leave FBI employees responsible for the investigation of January 6th. That sounds political to me.
I have not placed anyone on leave who has not violated their ethical obligation or their oath to the Constitution.
So if they were investigating January 6th, you believe they were violating an ethical obligation?
Nope. I think the common theme here is you putting words in my mouth, and I'm not going to tolerate it, nor will the men and women of the FBI.
Well, you did place on leave an analyst responsible for investigating Russia's meddling in the 2016 election. Is that politicization? Is that retribution?
No, not if she broke the law or the ethical guidelines. I don't know which case you're talking about, but that's the standard. And we will hold ourselves inwardly accountable. And we will not be strayed from our mission because people think we are politicizing the Bureau. If you want to talk about someone who was attacked by a weaponized Bureau, you're looking at him. And now he's the director of the FBI, and he's cleaning it up.
Well, I would just say to everyone who's listening that the FBI needs to be focused.
Okay, so the hunter became the hunted there. She was ready to interrogate him. She had a list of examples, questions. She was prepared. He didn't know what she was going to ask. He came off the cuff and really handed her ass back to her. So I like to see that. I just, again, hope he starts going after deep state assets and these Epstein files do emerge because it's up to him and Pam Bondi, and Pam Bondi is not looking so good at this point. And I hope Pam Bondi doesn't bring Kash Patel down with her. The next thing we have is, what time is it? 1:15? I started at 12:30. So 15 more minutes with Journey finalized. Okay, why don't we go into we'll do the quick Diddy news. I just like to give general updates for this. I don't want to go too in depth because you have done a video. And if anybody's interested and does speak Spanish, it's on Nat and the Guy Espanol.
Yes. But I do think my audience doesn't like it too much when I talk about him for some reason. I don't know. So with jury nearly finalized, Sean Diddy Combs' prosecutors say they may have lost the key witness.
Oh, and I mainly brought this up not because the jury has almost been finalized, but because they lost a key witness. And this isn't the first key witness they've lost. This case has slowly been deteriorating and falling apart over time. They offered Combs a deal a few weeks ago, and they flat out rejected it. And all the chess pieces that are being moved outside the courtroom are favoring Diddy. Somebody's moving some major pieces around outside of the courtroom, and it kind of looks like it may be Jay-Z and Jay-Z's private detectives and attorneys teams. I'm sure a lot of money is being spent in and outside of the courtroom to protect this asset.
Yes.
Okay, let's continue to go.
On this one?
No, to the next one, which is Japan. Tech company Panasonic cuts 4% of its global workforce.
Let me try and find it, because once again, you moved around.
There it was. Yep.
I think.
So let's read the headline, then read a little bit of the article, and I'll talk about this as it relates to some other political news as well.
So Japanese tech company Panasonic cuts 4% of its total global workforce as profits falter. Panasonic will slash its global workforce by 1,000 people, half in Japan and half overseas, to become a more efficient, lean company, the Japanese manufacturer said Friday. The job cuts, amounting to about 4% of its 230,000 workers, will include early retirement offers in Japan and closures and consolidation of various operations, according to the Osaka-based maker of home appliances, washing machines, and refrigerators. And then they say what else they do. Also Friday, Panasonic reported a 17.5% drop in profit for the fiscal year through March at 366 billion yen, $2.5 billion, down from 443 billion yen in the previous fiscal year. Its sales totaled 8.6 trillion yen, 58 billion, down 0.5 year on year.
And Japanese tech companies are a good indicator at what's happening in the Asian market with tech companies specifically. This will have a big influence on Chinese tech companies as well. This is why I'm always giving news about Japanese tech companies, camera companies like Sony, Panasonic, things like this. I had proposed the idea the other day that tariffs were working especially well for the AI sector as well as the tech sector within the United States. They're going to be given preferential treatment, and they're going to have first access to a lot of markets once these negotiations come through. Also, the chip manufacturing has been moved back to the United States, or at least they're starting to build those facilities. A lot of the AI chips are now going to be manufactured exclusively from the United States, from Taiwanese chip manufacturers that are moving their headquarters over there. This being said, what I had proposed the other day is that the Asian tech sector was not necessarily collapsing, but was really feeling the financial stress of these tariffs and not being able to get their products within the U.S. market without a tariff, which is going to highly benefit companies like Meta, Apple, things like this. Apple is moving their manufacturing to India, and you say, well, they're not manufacturing in the United States. Yes, they're not, but Trump has in the past given them exemptions for manufacturing in China. This time he was unwilling to give that exemption, and it seems like there was some kind of negotiation that happened behind closed doors, because Apple eventually announced they're going to move their entire manufacturing by next year, which is a huge move, especially when you're trying to do it that quickly. So I'm expecting if they do move their manufacturing to India, they're going to be given an exemption by the Trump administration again. Trump always has give preferential treatment to Apple, and right now he's giving a lot of preferential treatment to all the tech companies because he realizes that is the future of the United States if they want to maintain their global superpower status. Also, I've talked about I was talking about the data centers the last couple of days, and I keep bringing this up, but he's torn down the red tape and allowed Meta, Google, and other tech companies to build small nuclear reactors on data center sites that will be used exclusively for those data centers. Usually those to build a nuclear facility is highly regulated. So the fact that he's cutting the red tape down for them shows a huge investment in AI and the future of AI. There was a big worry that the AI sector wouldn't have enough energy to supply its needs if they wanted to be in global competition with China. But now with this deregulation of these mini nuclear power plants, specifically for AI companies, they are going to be able to compete. Okay, let's go into the EU. Yep. The EU publishes a U.S. product hot list and prepares for WTO action against Trump's tariffs. So read a little bit of this, then I'll react.
Oh, hold on. They want me to pay.
Okay.
I'm not going to pay the LA Times.
Yeah. You don't need to read it. I'll give my reaction before the article, and if you can find another article, then we'll read it.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, you found one. Oh, you're quick.
One that looks boring, but yeah.
That's okay.
Because they're reporting it from the Associated Press. I usually like to go to the actual website that reported it, but whatever. The EU publishes a U.S. product hit list and prepares for World Trade Organization action against Trump's tariffs. The European Union published a Thursday list of U.S. imports that it would target with retaliatory duties if no solution is found to end U.S. President Donald Trump's tariff war, which could include aircraft maker Boeing. The EU's executive branch, the European Commission, said it would also begin legal action at the World Trade Organization over the reciprocal tariffs that Trump imposed on countries around the world last month. The EU remains fully committed to finding negotiated outcomes with the U.S. Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said at the same time, we continue preparing for all possibilities. The Commission manages trade deals and disputes on behalf of the 27 EU countries. In early April, Trump put 20% levy on goods from the EU as part of his tariff onslaught against global trading partners. A week later, he paused them for 90 days to give countries a chance to negotiate solutions to U.S. trade concerns.
So this is a very bad play by the EU, and this is going to affect a lot of countries. It's really coming to fruition now that these countries gave up their sovereignty for an unelected government called the EU, and now the EU is negotiating on behalf of all of them when it comes to their new relationship with Donald Trump, and they're taking hostile action towards them. Preparing this list is only going to antagonize the United States and have them negotiate even harder with the EU. They'll go to all the friendly countries first, much like they did with the UK. They were able to go to the UK. UK is not part of the EU. They're part of Brexit. They've separated. They're their own entity, and they managed to claw back their sovereignty from that unelected government. Even though they negotiated a deal that wasn't necessarily that beneficial for them, it is going to be a lot better and a lot more beneficial than what the EU is going to get here. And as far as them targeting Boeing, this is crazy. The UK just pinned a deal that they're going to buy $10 billion worth of Boeing planes, and they're going to put Rolls-Royce engines in them, so it benefits both countries. So the EU economy is really on the verge of collapse. They don't have any real hard assets or enough to float their economy. That's why they're having trouble leveraging their economy. They don't have a lot of natural resources such as water, lumber, oil, natural gas, things like this. Based on what happens in the EU, I'm going to say Canada should really take this as a learning experience. You can see what the UK did, and now you're going to get to see what the EU is doing. I think that UK has a much better game plan, and Canada should follow in their footsteps, especially since they're connected to the UK. Canada still has its sovereignty, so negotiating a bad deal is going to be better than negotiating an extremely bad deal for Canada. As far as the EU goes, the EU thinks it has other trading partners, but it really doesn't. If they don't go to the US, they're going to have to go begging to Russia for oil and natural gas, which they don't want to do. And then they're going to have to go over to China, basically begging them to be their major trading partner. So we'll kind of see what happens here, but this is the wrong approach for the EU to take. And I really hope EU countries start breaking off, and this will give these countries an opportunity to break away from the EU by saying we no longer want to be part of the EU and pre-negotiating a deal with the US privately. This will give them a transitionary economy going from the EU back into Western influence US economy to potentially break off. Right now, the EU controls all the individual countries through their banking cartel. Okay. And this is the immigration center thing you're bringing up here, I believe.
Well, I'm just going based off of your list.
Yeah, this is the next one I wanted. So, and I kind of should have put this to the front when we talked about all the immigration stories with Canada. But
Yes.
the Border Patrol just posted this video. It's a before and after Trump took office at the, I believe it was the southern border. These were intake centers. You can turn down the volume. Just for copyright purposes, the volume's no good. And this is now. There is nobody there. And we have seen the numbers of people coming across the borders now, and it's virtually none. And if they are caught, they're caught and returned back to country of origin. So again, that was before, that was after, and then you've seen the after photo where the facility was completely dismantled. They're now building new facilities at the border, not for housing immigrants, but for housing the U.S. military, for barracks, armories, and things like this, so they can permanently have a presence on the border while they construct a new wall, I'm guessing. This is not as political or geopolitical. Do you have any thoughts on this one?
No.
No?
Well, I guess just people being like understanding that now there are consequences to something that before they didn't have.
Yeah. And there's been talks about, I'm just going to add this in there. I don't have a story right now, but I was watching something about it earlier, and they're saying the Trump administration is investing time, money, and meddling in Greenland's politics. And there's kind of a backlash over there. They're trying to invest in a separatist movement. That's good news to hear for me, because if they are doing that to Greenland, I'm expecting that they're doing the same in Alberta, but they're doing it much better in Alberta because they probably have a lot of assets in Canada they can utilize, which will help elevate that movement. It's gone from a 30% hardcore separatist movement to now almost 40% of the population in Calgary wants to separate. That might not, you need 51%. But 40% is enough to separate. Why? Because the people that do want to separate within Alberta and Calgary are highly motivated to get out and vote. The people that want to stay part of Canada aren't really motivated to vote either which way, and that's what the polling has kind of shown. So if they do have a vote today, it's most likely the separatists will come out strong to the polls, and that 40% will turn into a 55%. And that would be enough to separate.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But, yeah, still a while to go for that.
I think it's going to happen quicker than you think. You were talking years. I was talking less than 2 years at the most, as quick as 2 to 4 months.
Well, but for them to approve the bill that Danielle Smith proposed, it's going to take at least until the damn thing opens. I mean, Carney just now announced that he's going to be calling out his cabinet picks on the 13th. But
well, it's less about Danielle Smith now, because Danielle Smith is starting to back down. She says she doesn't want to be part of the separatist movement, but she will go forward with any petitions that are signed by the general public that meets the quota within Canada and put that forth. But she's trying to leverage that separatist movement to renegotiate the deal with Mark Carney. The problem with Mark Carney is he's leveraged the entire future of himself, his company, and Canada into climate change, green energy, and re-coordinating the entire world economy under this green agenda. Mm-hmm. So, okay, I was going to talk about this really quick. I didn't have an article because this was kind of breaking news, and that was J.D. Vance says Russia is asking for just too much. He was at the Munich Security Conference He was at the Munich Security Conference in the United States, meaning it's the same organization that holds these meetings all around the world. They held one in the United States. J.D. Vance spoke there. What he said was, when we was asked about these negotiations with Russia, is Russia just wants too much. They're starting to come to the conclusion they're not going to be able to kind of negotiate this deal. So it looks like they'll probably pull away, although I didn't like yesterday that they did finalize the rare earths minerals deal, but there's been a lot of speculation about that, meaning that maybe behind closed doors during the talks they've been doing with Russia, they had already pre-negotiated if they could get a rare earth mineral deal with Ukraine and Russia took the territory, that Russia would honor that pre-negotiated minerals deal that the U.S. had and allowed them to drill on Russian soil. So we'll see what happens. There's a lot of moving parts going there, but Donald Trump was not able to do what he said, which was day one he would negotiate that. I like, as you probably know, I like Donald Trump, but I call him out when he doesn't do something or he does something wrong, such as the direction he's going with digital IDs and possibly digital currency. I keep saying it because I want people to understand this is going on in the background of this administration. Okay, CDC says if America, maybe we can't play this one.
No, we can't.
On this one, but tonight on Rumble we'll play it.
Are you on BLE?
Yeah, I can't even talk about the story actually because it's too hot for YouTube. If I say it, the censors will grab me. And it's a video clip, so we'll show it tonight on RUMBLE. On our 9:15 show on this channel, it's Nat and the Guy.
Mexico City time. At
the end of that show, about an hour in, we switch over to Rumble to do 3 or 4 stories we can't talk about on YouTube.
Are you on BLE?
On RUMBLE. If there is anybody tuned in, if you could like and subscribe, it would really help this channel. We're based out of Mexico City. We fled Canada because of the crazy government policies, and YouTube just won't push our English content out to an English-speaking audience. That's why our other channel, Nat and the Guy in Spanish, has been successful because we're publishing from Mexico City, and YouTube will push it out to a Spanish-speaking audience.
Yes.
You have anything to say before we head out?
No, I'll ask you during the live tonight.
Okay. And that's all. We're signing off.
Have a good day. We'll see you at 9:15 on this channel again.